Starship has always been a shining point that space enthusiasts like us enjoy observing and following. But there's another group that's very interested in this giant spacecraft. That's the United States military. The early 2024 news about the Department of Defense wanting to own Starship to serve the government shows that they are not concerned about flying to Mars or expanding Elon Musk's consciousness or anything similar in space. Instead, they see a potential machine for their own military plans, including the ability to move quickly from one point to another on Earth. And we know that the Air Force always has a crazy demand for SpaceX's Starship variants. Let's explore today's episode with Alpha Tech to find out why. The Department of Defense recently discussed Starship's capabilities at the Space Mobility Conference, expressing interest in its potential to revolutionize national security. SpaceX senior advisor Gary Henry emphasized that Starship's primary purpose is to reach Mars. Rocket cargo point to point is not the reason we're building Starship, he said. We're building Starship to get to Mars, but what we're finding is it's a system we're putting together that has profound impacts for national security, and one of them just happens to be rocket point to point. However, it has also become evident that the rocket's features have profound implications for military operations. So, what features of Starship are attracting U.S. military officials? Starship's quite unlike any rocket that's come before it. When operational, its size, payload capacity, and ability to land and fly again, as well as the number of vehicles that'll be constructed, will eclipse anything built over the last 70 years of spaceflight. First, we must mention the rapid transport capabilities of Starship. The driving force behind this is the military's ability to use the rocket to deliver supplies, and perhaps even troops in the future, to anywhere in the world in under an hour. Pentagon officials began considering this idea 2 decades ago, but it's only with the advent of Starship that this has moved closer to reality. Envision a number of containers sitting in a warehouse down in Cape Canaveral. We go to an alert level. We pull them up, you start putting them on the rocket, said Gregory Spangers, chief scientist for the U.S. Air Force Research Lab. At each suggestive alert level, your time to launch shrinks, and we can get it down to an hour. Spangers said teams have already been making mock-ups of Starship's cargo bay, figuring out how to take advantage of a quick supply run. Speed's the obvious draw, but the cost is dropping and getting closer to existing expenses for moving supplies. The Starship Super Heavy system will be fully reusable, unlike any rockets currently flying. The Super Heavy booster, similar to SpaceX's current Falcon 9 fleet, will return to the launch site. However, unlike the Falcon 9, Super Heavy can be caught by the launch tower, stacked onto a new Starship, refueled, and relaunched rapidly. Coupled with its design, Starship has significantly reduced costs for SpaceX. Henry said SpaceX's current fleet of Falcon 9 rockets with boosters originally designed to fly 10 times, but with future boosters that might go up as many as 40 times, have brought the price of flying payloads from about $4,500 per pound to about $900 per pound. The Falcon 9 has a capacity of 44,000 pounds to 132,000 pounds. But Starship is a very different animal, he said. Starship's fundamentally meant to be rapidly reusable. We designed the vehicle from the outset to fly 100 times, not 10 times, and it's going to deliver 220,000 to 250,000 pounds, 100 to 115 metric tons to low Earth orbit. He said that Starship would bring the cost trajectory down to a starting point of $90 per pound. Musk has said he could see that dropping even more to $9 a pound down the road. If achieved, this means that one launch of Starship would cost less than 1,000th of the closest equivalent rocket deployed, NASA's Space Launch System. Henry said their price is close to what one gets using a C-17 cargo plane transport, the supply workhorse of the military, but with flights that take hours instead of minutes. Next is the frequency factor that SpaceX plans for launches. The launch frequency of Starship depends on the scale of building a massive fleet of spacecraft by SpaceX. SpaceX envisions building as many as 1,000 Starships, consisting of different variants. In the years to come, they'll launch dozens, even hundreds of Starships, and eventually thousands of Starships each year. And if just assuming you have a rapidly reusable system that could, let's say, launch twice a day from a single launch base, you're going to find very, very quickly we're going to run out of places to launch, Henry said. Right now, SpaceX has one usable launch tower at Starbase in Texas, but it's already building out more. Steel girders constructed at SpaceX's Kennedy Space Center facilities were loaded Wednesday on a barge to make their way to Starbase. SpaceX is also building out a Starship launch tower at KSC. To meet its launch plans, it'll need multiple launch towers from its existing launch sites at KSC, Texas, and California. But SpaceX could spread its footprint to new launch sites down the line as well, and that could feed into point-to-point plans the military is interested in, Henry said. I think the answer we're going to need to both as a company, but also as a nation to fully leverage Starship, he said. We're going to need a proliferation of launch sites within the continental US and maybe even globally to fully capture this. The actions of the US military and SpaceX regarding new launch sites have also begun with initial steps. Recently, on February 16th, the U.S. Air Force, alongside collaborating agencies FAA, NASA, and the U.S. Coast Guard, began conducting environmental impact studies for launch pads for SpaceX's Heavy class Starship rockets, according to a recent statement from them. The Space Force, a part of the U.S. Air Force, similar to how the U.S. Marine Corps is for the U.S. Navy, has proposed three options for additional launch towers for Starship. Option 1, SpaceX would modify and utilize SLC 37 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Option 2, SpaceX and CCSFS would construct a new pad, SLC 50, between the current SLC 37 and SLC 40. Option 3, no action, where no Starship constructions or launches would occur from CCSFS. The decision will be deliberated among the agencies in 4 scheduled meetings in March 2024, so stay tuned for those significant decisions. It's one of the facets of China's growing space program that is starting to outpace the U.S. During a talk at the conference, Space Force intelligence analyst Chief Master Sergeant Ronald Lurch with Space Systems Command said China was beginning to build out more launch sites and advance their rocket types to try and catch up to the U.S. There's a bottleneck that they need to alleviate, so they're doing something about it, he said, noting that it performed its first sea launch in the South China Sea as well. He also noted that their price points are projected to fall within China's Long March 5 rocket, flying at around $1,360 per pound, but the Long March 9 rockets aiming to be completely reusable with a price cut in half down to $680 a pound. China is moving very, very close. It is full speed ahead in terms of reusability, he said. And that too is relying on commercial launches, not just government rockets. This thrust feeds into China's stance as a superpower in space as it continues to build out its low Earth orbit space station and has plans to pursue a crewed lunar lander before the end of the decade. On top of any sort of lunar competition, China's saber-rattling in terms of trying to reunify with Taiwan has the U.S. military concerned. Right now, we have a very aggressive adversary, said Space Force Colonel Nathan Vosters, Director for Requirements, Resources, and Programs for the Indo-Pacific region. He said the ability for rapid delivery to that part of the world ties directly to ensuring a free and open region, which generates 60% of the world's gross domestic product. This technology, I think, has the advantage to both promote and continue free and open Indo-Pacific while also contributing directly to the war fight if and when that time would come, he said. At the very least, this changes the calculus problem a little bit for our adversaries in the region. Spangers said getting over the technological hurdle that Starship is